Hi, friends. You are about to listen to a very beautiful episode where my guest shares her story to a pregnancy, a very, very sought out pregnancy. Unfortunately, weeks after we recorded this episode, our guest lost the pregnancy. And it was important for her that I mention this prior to listening to the podcast. I ask that you take a moment to send our guest all of your love and best wishes so that she may come back to the podcast and tell us again another successful story and one that would end with a live baby in her arms. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, a podcast dedicated to help you in the process of getting out of your own way and letting go of the mental barriers that have been self-created that stand on the way of you and the emotional freedom and happiness that you so desire. I am Olga, your host, and in here I'm going to offer you raw but real examples that will help you step into the shoes of becoming the CEO of your own life. Because let's face it, in a world where you can be anyone you want, why not promote yourself to the CEO position? I cannot wait to see you inside. All right, welcome guys to another Journey to Happy episode. This is an episode related to fertility, infertility, and pregnancy. I am over the moon excited that I have a guest speaker here today and who she is, because she's going to tell us and talk about something that we don't hear very often, which is pregnancy through surrogacy. She is in Canada and she is currently pregnant with her first through surrogacy for sure. And she's going to be telling us her story of how she made it to that decision of choosing to have somebody else carry her baby, the ups and downs she went through to make it to that decision. And you guys, she's promised to come back to the podcast once the baby's here to tell us part B of this journey that she's been in. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Valery Brennan. She is an executive with Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Canada in Ottawa. She lives in Ottawa. She is a wife, or I should say fiancé, and a stepmom and a soon-to-be mom through surrogacy. Valery, thank you so much for being so open when I asked you to come into the podcast and so ready to come and share your story. It means a lot to me, and I know my audience will definitely appreciate it. So welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I see that you're at work right now.
I am. Yes, I am in my office.
Thank you so much for making the time for us. Like, it's very, very, very helpful. And why I say this is because I've been coaching women through the ups and downs of infertility. And almost never do I hear people going through this option of surrogacy. Now, I read one book that changed my life. It's called It Starts with the Egg. And the author of that book, who did some incredible research about the importance of improving egg quality, and she did it because she was super young, but she had also low egg reserve, and she started changing her not just eating habits, but changing a whole lot of things that she describes in the book to improve egg quality. And I reached out to her, and she answered back. Actually, this author, Rebecca Fred, will answer back to you guys if you inbox her on Instagram or in Facebook. And she told me that her baby ended up being carried by another woman. She did surrogacy because she had a really bad case of scoliosis, so she couldn't carry her own baby. And it piqued my interest because at that point I didn't have a baby yet. So we didn't even know if I couldn't carry the baby. We didn't know where the problem was. We were still at unexplained. Valery, you and I have been Instagram friends for a while. I think we've been following each other's stories for a while, and that's the beauty of this community of infertility is that complete strangers, we might be in the same city. I think you and I exchanged messages about options because of being in the same city, and since then we've been following each other's stories, and it's been very exciting to hear about this recent pregnancy that I get to celebrate from in the Instagram world and now have you into the podcast. So why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself? How long did you start trying to conceive? Just give me the background before we get to the juicy part of surrogacy.
Okay, awesome. And I can talk about this for days and days. So let me know if I'm telling you, if I'm saying too much. But yes, so Fred, my partner, and I actually started trying for a baby in 2016. I actually was working temporarily in Africa at that point, and he came for a visit. And we thought, okay, now is the time. Fred was a little bit older. He's a little bit older than I am. He was 40 at the time. I was 32. And so we thought, okay, well, now is the time. So I remember making that decision, very conscious decision while we were in Africa. And I remember coming back from Africa, hoping I'd be pregnant. And that was June 2016, taking a pregnancy test, and it was negative, and I was so upset. And so that was the first pregnancy test that I ever took in my entire life. And it came back negative. And I thought, oh, it's not as easy as I thought to get pregnant. And so we tried for a few months. And obviously, like any woman going through this, I started Googling, okay, what am I doing wrong? What tips do I need to take? How long does it usually take to get pregnant? And all of these things. And so after a few months of trying, even though I was under 35, I went to my doctor, and they usually say, if you're under 35, go to your doctor after a year of trying. If you're over 35, go after 6 months. So I remember actually pretending that it had been a year so that my doctor would actually see me.
I did the same thing.
Because in my mind, I was like, I know something's up, because my cycle was regular, and we were trying at the right time every month, and nothing was happening. Mm-hmm. So she did some blood work and ended up referring me to the Ottawa Fertility Clinic at that point. So that was early 2017, I would say. And I remember at that point, the appointment being in like 3 or 4 months. And that wait time felt like an eternity, right? Because you just want to get pregnant at that point. And so the doctors in Ottawa, Dr. Schmorgan, did a bunch of additional tests. And like you, Olga, our initial diagnosis was unexplained infertility. And so at that point, they recommend, trying for insemination, artificial insemination, or IUI. And you're a little bit naive. You think, oh, I'm just going to do an IUI and I'm going to get pregnant. That's all it takes, right?
Yeah.
So we did that, and that didn't work. And we did that again, and that didn't work. And then soon after, we were put on the IVF funded cycle list. And before we knew it, we were trying through IVF, and that didn't work. And despite, I want to say, luckily, we were, having a decent amount of swimmers, I'm going to call them, and, eggs, and we were producing some embryos, but for some reason I would never get pregnant. And so after a few failed tries in Ottawa, and Olga, I have to say that was because of you, we decided to go for a second opinion. And at that point, it was probably around the time where you had a successful pregnancy or just had announced your successful pregnancy. And I know you and I were talking, and I had seen a lot of people going to Toronto and having success. And I think at that point, we were just looking for that second opinion and different treatment options. And so we decided to go to Toronto for additional treatment and to see Dr. Baratz. And this whole thing, so we went to see Dr. Baratz, discussed her case. He at first wanted to do mini IVF because he thought maybe it's an embryo quality issue. So we'll try and harvest less eggs in hopes to get better quality embryo. And I remember September 2019 doing my first IVF cycle with him. And we ended up with one blastocyst that was a day 7 blastocyst. And he was happy, but I was really upset because it's a numbers game. So I wanted more embryos, right? And one thing that I should say about Dr. Baratz is that he listens and he's open to suggestions and having that, back and forth conversation. And I remember telling him no, like I want more embryos. And so he said, okay, fine, we'll switch your meds. And we tried a new stim medication. And that was December 2019. And that cycle actually generated 6 PGS tested embryos. So we were really happy.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And I remember, and if you know anything about that stuff, because I know I'm talking lingo for a lot of people, but PGS means that your embryo is genetically normal, which means that you have a really good chance of success with those embryos. I think they say something like 70 to 80% of them actually. Yeah. And so we have 6. So we're thinking, okay, there's a baby in there. There must be a baby in there. And so we transferred 2, like in 2 different cycles, and they both didn't take. So at that point, I remember having a really frank conversation with Dr. Baratz. That was in February of this year. And he said, well, I can't tell you why it's not working. The science doesn't know. And we had tried all the, extra treatment options that are available at the clinic to give us the better chance of success. And I still wasn't getting pregnant. So he said, maybe you want to consider using a gestational surrogate to carry your embryo and lead to a successful pregnancy. And I remember that was the deciding moment where, like, obviously it's upsetting to hear that, right? And it's like, you have to take a moment, but he was so good about it. I think our conversation was, a good 45 minutes. And I remember asking him, if it was your wife, what would you do? And he said, well, I treat all my patients like family. So if I'm telling you, you might want to consider that, it's because you might want to consider that. So we took a break there. And Fred and I were going to Costa Rica. That was just before COVID. And I remember in Costa Rica having a lot of conversations with Fred about, are we doing this? Like, financially, can we do this? Emotionally, can we handle it? But in the end, for us, if that was our best chance at getting our own biological baby, we decided that was the way to go.
I love so many things that you said here, and I want to break them down for the listeners because I think it's very important to keep some of these details that you and I may think are the norm for people who are starting this process of trying to conceive, and where you realize that you might need assistance to get pregnant. Finding a doctor that is open to have conversations with you, that you can say, I want more, I want less. Valery was seeing my same doctor, and he knew I was a yoga teacher. He knew I was into natural resources and natural holistic healing. And he was like, okay, I'm trying to make this the most holistic, natural way possible. Even though I don't recall asking him for that because I was so desperate for a baby. Like, listen, I don't care. Do whatever you need to do. Clone my body if you need to. I don't care, but do something and give me my baby. That when it came time for me actually requesting an increase of hormones, he was like, nope. Remember, you want to have this done in a way that it impacts your body the least. And I felt like this guy cares. Like, when I'm going crazy because I desperately want a baby, he's telling me, like, hold on, that's not good for your body. So let's not go through that path. Which I think is so important. And then the second part that is very important about connecting to your doctor is that trust, that conversation that you, Val, took 45 minutes to have with him, where you ask him, well, if this was your wife, will you, like, you know how many times I asked him the same, like, what will you do, doctor? And he would actually only give me his answer after I had made up my mind. And then he'd be like, yeah, I would do the same thing. But the options he would provide them because he, evidence-based with what he had in front of him, he thought was my better chance of succeeding. And I don't know for you, but for me, he was never wrong. Any of the suggestions that he made, that he told me or guided me towards opening my awareness to, he was right on, exactly as he said. And that increased my trust in him. But point number one is to have this doctor. You can have a back and forth conversation. point number two is to be able to trust this person, whoever that person is, that gives you this sense of like, okay, he cares, he's taking care of me, and he's making choices or helping me make choices that he would tell his wife to do, to consider. And I think that's such a brilliant question to ask your doctor. Either if it's a female, if this was you, you go with this option, and or if this is a male, then if this was your wife, would you do this? Because I think that this is so important. So right before COVID, you are in Costa Rica, and you're like talking this out with your partner. Also very important to do, guys. Never rush into these decisions. They take so much out of our emotions, our well-being, our finances, that we really want to make sure we're in the same page with our partners and that we've seen every possible option play out. So this was in February of this year. Like, we have very similar timelines, I feel, because 2016 I had my first miscarriage after trying to get pregnant, and like, I feel that we were on similar pathways. So you don't have a diagnosis for a fact, but you're now considering somebody else carry your baby. What went through your emotional body? Like, what was happening in your mind, in your heart? What were these conversations with your boyfriend, with your fiance all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's, you have to also understand that I summarized 4 years of her life in a few minutes, right? But at that point, you're just too so desperate to have a successful pregnancy, right? So for us, the conversation was very much, okay, obviously there's grief because I want to be able to carry, I want to feel all of that. I want to feel the baby kicking. I would like to be able to deliver the baby and breastfeed if possible. So all of those things are things that I'm not going to be able to do for the most part, right? So there's a lot of grief associated with that. But for Fred and I, one thing that kept us going through all of those years was, and it hasn't been easy. It wasn't easy. And so that's something that I really want to emphasize, because infertility is such a roller coaster of emotions, and there's huge highs and huge down moments. And we've gone through it all. But one thing that kept us going as a couple through all of that was, no matter how, there's going to be a baby. And so that was kind of our motto throughout the years, that we will find a way to have a baby. No matter what that looks like, we're going to get there. And that was the only thing that actually kept us going through all the pain, through all the challenges, the grief and everything. So at that point, we're in Costa Rica, we're having conversations. We're actually, thinking about the numbers, because financially it's a big decision. But for us, it was, wow, well, that's actually a really good option, because we're going to have our own biological child through this. Whereas we had considered, for example, male donor or female donor, to get us to our dream of having a baby. And for us, having that option of having a biological child through gestational surrogacy was such an amazing gift. And in my mind, I could project myself to the moment where she would tell me that she had a positive home pregnancy test. And when I was projecting myself, I could see myself being so happy and so relieved. I'm just telling you this and I can cry because it's so emotional, right? And so I was like, you know what? When she tells me that we are pregnant, it's going to be the best day of my life. And that was it. That was the decision. We said, okay, now, how do we get there? Because it's one thing to make the decision. It's another thing to get there.
So I have watery eyes because about 4 weeks ago or so, I got a text on Instagram from Val, and it was a photo of a pregnancy test, which I'm going to start crying. Knowing your story, was so freaking excited to see that. Anyways, this is what this journey is all about. You become sisters with anybody who's gone through the journey and has tried so hard to make it to that pregnancy. And that's what we're celebrating. So it's a pregnancy. And I want people to understand that this is such a long process for some of us. One, you're not alone. And two, that visualization is, if it gives you that, like smile in your heart, whether that's if you visualize having an egg donor, sperm donor, an adoption baby or child, or gestational surrogate. Like that is so important, because that's your heart telling you, yes, this is the path. Like, keep going. Uh, I coach women all the time to get to understand their body and how their body talks to them. And these are the signs of the body talking, where you can visualize and you like, it's a go, it's a green light, do this. Now that I've composed myself over like the excitement I felt of seeing that pregnancy announcement from you, and like I don't know if I told you them, but I felt so incredibly honored that I was amongst the people who got a private message with a photo of that positive pregnancy test. I think that to this date, that has to be one of the most exciting things that as an Instagrammer I get to enjoy, is people in this city, friends are, and otherwise, that I have never met in person. Like, wow, this is the first time I see you other than in the photos, that I can get so excited to see their success. You mentioned finances and this not being easy. And this is something that I really love to talk, if you're open, about, and describe to people the cost and the legal implications, because we don't know a lot, we don't hear a lot about it. And I feel doctors are very good, at least in Canada, at giving you the price and the complications at first, kind of like to discourage you, like this is not going to be worth your time, and or otherwise. And so I don't know if there's people listening to us right now who may have had all kinds of failures at IVF and IUI, and who might totally walk away from the option of having a gestational surrogate carry their baby because of lack of information. So let's break it down. Surrogacy 101. What does it involve? What does it cost? And how did you two manage to figure this out and create a plan to make it work?
Okay. Yes, absolutely. I want to say, just before I get into that, though, Olga, that one of the reasons why you got a private message with the pregnancy test is because you had something to do with us getting there, because we followed your journey. We were so happy when you got pregnant with Mateo, and when you had the baby. And at first, coming from Ottawa and going to seeing a doctor in Toronto for us sounded like a crazy idea. But when you see other people having success, you think, okay, well, other people are doing it and it's working, so why don't I do that? So I felt like you had a little something to do with that success. So that's why I needed to share with you. So I wanted to say that. But okay, getting into the financial aspect of surrogacy. And so at first, after we made the decision, so again, Dr. Baratz, he does a lot of surrogacy journeys here in Canada, and he made it feel like it was achievable. So that's one thing that I really appreciate about that doctor, is he made it sound like it was a good option and that it was achievable, and that, he deals with that all the time. So I felt very much supported by him and his team. And that was the first thing that, got me in a certain level of comfort to pursue that. And then, but I had no idea where to start. And so he said that he recommended one of the agencies. There's many agencies in Canada, but there's one who deals with the Create Fertility Center more often. There's a lot of agencies that deal with Create, but Dr. Baratz is used to dealing with that agency in particular. So he said, I'll forward your case to them and maybe you can have a conversation. That being said, at first we were not too sure if we wanted to use an agency or not. And I can, maybe explain the difference. So in Canada, you have two options. You can go through a surrogacy journey using an agency, which will match you with a surrogate and help you with the support throughout the journey and the reimbursements and so on. Or you can do what they called an independent or an indie journey, where you just find your own surrogate and kind of manage that journey on your own. There's a lot of Facebook groups, surprisingly, where people go on there and they actually, write up a profile and actually get matched with oftentimes complete strangers, and then complete an independent journey. We thought actually that we could do this. We thought it would be a good option for us to go independent, and you save on the cost. So that's a huge driver for people going independent, is you save the agency fees and you can kind of agree with your surrogate on the reimbursement schedule. And it might end up being a little bit cheaper than if you use an agency. That being said, the reason why in the end we decided to go with an agency was because of the timelines. At this point, I mean, Fred is turning 45. I'm turning 37. We really want a baby. And for us, time was of the essence, which is why we decided to sign with an agency in the spring. So there's obviously... Let me
stop you there for 2 seconds, because I know for a fact people like just thinking like, but how much is it? And what do you mean reimbursement? Do you mind breaking that down a little bit? So let's say if I go with an agency, it's going to cost me $50,000. And if I do it independently, it's going to cost me 40,000. Would it be a 10,000 difference, 20,000 difference? How much do you think?
Right. Okay. So, well, I mean, different agencies have different price points and they offer different services. But I think on average, you can expect to pay somewhere between $8,000 and $16,000 only for the agency fee. And so that's something that you don't have to pay if you go independent. But just to give you a ballpark, this is probably how much the agency will cost you. And then the reimbursements are what the surrogate actually gets every month. And that's also part of your agreement, your legal agreement that you sign with your surrogate. Is some surrogates will get reimbursements up to, on average, maybe $2,000 a month during the pregnancy. Some will ask more. So just if you count, 10 months of pregnancy, more or less, because it starts a little bit before and it ends a little bit after, and it's $2,000 a month, that's probably the amount that you should think about for your surrogate's reimbursements. And that includes things like her mileage, her lost wages, her food, or portion of her food, I should say, any expense related to the actual pregnancy. So if she's taking prenatal vitamins, things like that. So there's those costs also. You can also anticipate that you might have to pay some daycare if she has children and needs to put them into daycare to go for an appointment, for example. So there's a lot of extra charges that are part of those reimbursements that equal to about that amount. And one thing, our surrogate, for example, is a very experienced surrogate. So one thing you can expect is that a first-time surrogate will have lower reimbursements than an experienced one.
How come?
I think just because that's a very good question, Olga. Actually, I don't know the answer, but I think part of it is just because the more they do it, the more they feel it's going to be, they bring that experience. And so therefore they are asking for more additional reimbursements as part of the journey.
Right.
Which also need to be directly linked to the pregnancy. So that's the legislation in Canada and the law. So you have to make sure that anything that's in your legal agreement, and there are lawyers in Canada here that, know the legislation very well. So you're well supported by your lawyer. But what I want to say is, as part of those reimbursements, all of the expenses, you need to make sure that they are directly linked to the pregnancy, to be aligned with the law and the legislation. And that's also something that an agency will help you navigate through, right? Because you don't have to make those calls yourself. Someone else is looking at the receipts from the surrogate and actually preparing the financial tables for you to reimburse as intended parents.
This is like running a business.
Yes, it is like running a business. Although in Canada, surrogacy is altruistic, which means you can't directly pay the surrogate for a service, contrary to the States, for example, where you can agree with the surrogate, we're going to pay you $60,000 or $30,000, whatever the amount is. In Canada, you can't pay a surrogate. It needs to be tied to reimbursements associated with the pregnancy, and that's very important.
If you're a woman trying to conceive and you have been experiencing the ups and downs, the roller coaster of emotions that can be so present when the expectations do not meet, when what you had in your mind and you had hoped for is not coming through, know that you don't need to go through those ups and those downs all by yourself. That it is completely normal to feel defeated and hopeless at times, but it doesn't have to be that way. I know because I've been there. As a mindset coach, I specialize in helping women like yourself go through those ups and downs only in a healthier, friendlier, and more compassionate way towards yourself, in a way where you can shift your mindset from being mean and bullying you to being understanding, compassionate, and helpful. I have walked many women, including myself, from a place of despair to a place of confidence and hope. I want to do that with you. I have created the perfect program that is holistic and combines therapeutic techniques as well as life coaching and mindset techniques that together help you go through this journey for as long as you want or as long as you are in the journey in a much healthier and supported way. Mindfully Trying to Conceive is a membership program that you can join for as low as $97, and you can be supportive immediately. Mindset videos on subjects that are very relevant to you and your experience, and Zoom calls to hear other women who are going through the same and talk about ways to problem solve these downs that feel so heavy. You're not alone, and this does not have to be a more difficult journey than already is. If you're ready to feel better, if you're ready to let go of comparison, if you're tired of feeling sad and unhappy about and while you wait for this baby, come to Mindfully Trying to Conceive. Learn actually proven techniques that will help you bring a peace of mind, hope, and confidence in this journey. You're not alone, and you don't have to do this alone. My name is Olga, and I cannot wait to see you inside the program. Okay, so up to 2,000, but I need the receipts to be reimbursing for this. So I'm paying for the vitamins, I'm paying for part of her food, acupuncture appointments if she needs to have them, or whatever the case might be.
Gym even, yeah.
Writing her a check every month for $2,000, and I have no idea where that money went. We can't pay a surrogate in Canada. We reimburse her for the cost of carrying this pregnancy.
Correct. Yeah. And then the other fees that you have to plan for are things like the contract, so the lawyer. So there's, a FT price point for that contract, but you want to make sure that that contract is, well done, and that you are dealing with an experienced lawyer who understands surrogacy arrangements. So that's a very key point. And then everything related to the fertility treatment and the fertility clinic will actually charge an extra coordination fee for surrogacy reasons. So there's all of those fees. So they say in Canada that a typical journey will cost somewhere between, I think, $60,000 and $100,000.
Wow. And so this is for one pregnancy?
Yes.
How many embryos? You have 6 healthy embryos?
Well, so we have 4 left. Because we tried to transfer a few in me before going through surrogacy. 3 of them are PGS tested. So we'll have a big family, Olga.
Oh, so exciting. And she's pregnant with 1 right now. There's
Correct.
1 baby there. And so is your hope then to do this 3 more times, to use all 3 of your embryos, obviously?
No, I'm totally joking when I say that. First of all, we could not afford that. So let's just put that out there. It's a lot of, compromises financially. Obviously, we're not rich. Fred and I are both, I'm a government worker. He's a mortgage broker. We have good salaries, but we have salaries. We're not, rich people. And we had to make a lot of sacrifices to make the numbers work for this pregnancy. And one thing that I often remind people is, we've been engaged for 4 years and we really want a nice wedding, but we can't afford it right now because all of our money is going towards making this baby happen. So, no, we can't do 3 more times. And honestly, part of me feels like I don't even want to say out loud that I would maybe consider having another baby, because at this point we're so focused on that one healthy baby, and that's our main goal.
Oh, I love it. One day at a time, and like, yes, celebrating this one fully. I was saying jokingly to you before we started recording that we may have spent the same amount of money for our one babies, because I did 4 rounds of IVF, one of which was the funded one. But even then, with all the extra treatments that I wanted done, like
intralipids,
infusions, you know, and all the other things. Like, I think I had about every cocktail in me possible to make it work each round. And with this transfer that we racked up easily, we think between 70 to 80,000 so we call Mattelli $80,000 baby. And so it's okay. It's a matter of time before he has to start working and pay us back. That's
exactly.
So, and I want us to just like to talk a little bit about those sacrifices financially that we have to make. You said you both are, you're employed by the government. He's a mortgage broker. My husband and I are both self-employed, so it definitely took, even going into debt, obviously, for an amount that we thought and knew we could pay it back. Mattel's been paid by now. But let's just dive it into the people who are panicked about the cost, and how, like, what are some of the sacrifices that you guys made that made it achievable, that made this be a possibility? Do you have to pay everything at once? Are lawyers or clinics able to help you pay as you go? Like, what are some of those little things that you guys figure out that you could do?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I want to say the fact that we're in COVID year actually helped us financially, because we have less expenses. We don't, drive to work as often. I don't buy myself as much clothes as I usually do. I buy a lot of clothes. So that's one of my sacrifices. It may sound very superficial to some people, but like, I'm someone who loves fashion. I buy, a lot of clothes, but that's something that was part of our sacrifices, is I needed to, cut down on that. And that's something that to me is a sacrifice, because it's something that I love. And so we're not traveling this year. So all of that travel money is also going towards the baby, but also it's more of a monthly expense. So you can kind of spread it out over the course of 1 year. You can also I've heard so many people start a side business on Etsy or something to, cover some of the costs. We have a rental property that we use some of the money towards paying for these bills. But also, we have a line of credit, and the reality is a lot of those costs go to a line of credit, and we're going to pay it over years, because we desperately want that baby so bad that we're willing to make those sacrifices. At the end of the day, I think, I know it's a big financial number, but I think for most people, there's a way. You can talk to your financial advisor at the bank. They can maybe help with a loan. There's a lot of options out there that can help you through surrogacy. I know also a lot of fertility clinics are flexible with payment arrangements, so that's something to consider as well. But yeah, no, it's expensive. I'm not gonna hide it. It is.
You can't sugarcoat it. It is expensive, and
exactly.
And that might be a stressor on its own, or what makes you decide against surrogacy or IVF, for that matter, more than one treatment. Like, I think that every step of the way of this infertility, we're faced with that reality that is going to cost us something. Now, if you're in the States listening to this, or in any other country where healthcare isn't funded by the government like we have it here, these conversations may be like sounding to you like crazy. Why are they spending so much time talking about how much it costs? And that's because we're very lucky in Canada and spoiled, and we are not used to having to pay for our medical expenses in general. But when it comes to fertility, unfortunately, we do have to cover that cost. And in Ontario, we're lucky that every woman has a paid IVF cycle in her lifetime. I still think that's upsetting. That should be every woman and every man, so that at least a couple has two chances at IVF. But as it stands right now, every woman in Ontario has one funded IVF and treatment. And unfortunately, that doesn't always work for everybody. So, like in my case, I had to self-fund 3 more. Plus, I was going to Toronto, and many of us have to go because if our cities are small, we have to go to a larger city, to different doctors. And I just hope that by listening to this, you're not psyching yourself out. You're not thinking, this isn't for me, that's too far, this is too expensive, but that you open your mind to thinking, how would I make this work? Whatever the options are for you. Like if right now it's an IUI, if it is trying naturally more, but you need more resources to make it work, that's all I want you guys listening to this to think about. Like, how could we make it work? Because as Valery is talking, she's just a regular human being who made it work. Obviously, yes, she said it. They have good salaries that allow them to like plan. And I wouldn't suggest for anybody to get into debt to the amount that you think you're going to not be able to pay it back. But if it's doable, the sky is the limit. Now, what would have happened if this was not a successful pregnancy with some of the costs involved? Is this like money down the drain? Like there is no guarantees, obviously.
There's no guarantees like anything else, which is why oftentimes you'll hear if you're entering a surrogacy arrangement, you probably want to do it with more than one embryo because it's a lot of pressure to put on that one embryo. And Olga, I know you know what we're talking about when we say that pressure on that one embryo. But so what they'll say oftentimes, or they'll advise, a lot of people do it with only one. But if it doesn't work, it's even, I think, more upsetting because of all of the investments, emotionally and financially, I should say. For us, we, as part of our contract agreement, we were going to try up to 4 transfers through this contract. And you don't actually start reimbursing the surrogate until you have a positive pregnancy. So those costs also only comes once you have success, which is good. But the agency fee, the legal fees, the clinic fees, all of those fees are the same whether it's successful or not. So there are a lot of financial investment and time also, I have to say, because when you're going through years of infertility, time becomes the essence. And every failure, part of us, we're thinking, oh, we're getting older. And so when are we going to, finally have a successful pregnancy? So for us, luckily, and this was the case in point, first embryo transfer worked and we had a successful pregnancy and we're now almost 8 weeks. So I know it's still early to tell the world, but that's something that we feel so happy about and just want to share with, the world that this worked for us and it's working. And we're really excited about the next steps.
What it was like to go through the transfer, this time not in your body, and then get the news. Like, I know you visualized this and you felt like you were going to be really happy once this woman would tell you, but what did that feel like for you?
So our surrogate is the most amazing human being, and she's similar to me in the sense that she tests very early. And there's a lot of school of thoughts around whether or not you should be testing before your blood work. And I think to each their own. Some people do it, some people don't. I am an early tester. So as early as 4 days after, the embryo transfer, I started testing when it was me, and she's the same. So she would actually every morning and every evening send me pictures of the home pregnancy test. And I remember her sending me the first one, and it was, I think, 3.75 days past transfer, not even 4. And she swore she could see a line. And obviously she's in Edmonton and we're in Ottawa. So, she's not in the same city. So we're all doing this, on the phone. And so I'm looking at the picture, and then, how some people will do a contrasting picture,
yes,
in hopes to see the line better. So she sends me a contrasting picture, and I think there's a line, but at the same time, I'm like, is it really there, or are we dreaming, right?
I have thought this before, and I was wrong. So
exactly. So that was the first line, but at the same time, what an exciting moment. There's so much hope in that picture, right? And you're thinking, oh my gosh, is it going to get darker? We need it to get darker. And, I'm at work that day, but all I can think about is that line. And then in the afternoon or at night, she sends me another one and it's a little bit darker. And then, twice a day throughout, twice a day throughout the time between the embryo transfer and the blood test, she was sending me, 2 pictures a day, and we could see the line growing. But for us, when we finally, I think at 5 days, the line was really there, and it was taking 10,000 pounds off her shoulders. That's exactly how it felt. I was crying like a baby. It felt like, oh, finally, after all of those years, there's a baby on the way. So that moment was just extraordinary.
I'm going to cry again. This is amazing. I can only imagine that feeling, because it's been 4 years of like literally trying everything that's been at your disposal to try. And then and I do want to take a moment to thank every woman who has decided to carry a baby on behalf of somebody else. Like, you are amazing. That's all I have to say. Like, you redefined the word amazing, surrogate moms. I have been pregnant with my own child, and I cannot imagine wanting to do this again for the sake of just allowing somebody else to experience motherhood. Because pregnancies are hard. And no matter what you're being reimbursed, your body is still growing a tiny little human. And I thank the world of you for wanting to do this out of the goodness of your heart, so that a woman like Val gets to experience motherhood. I think, let's just take a moment to thank all surrogate moms and all the women who have donated their eggs for the same purpose, and men who have donated their sperm for the same purpose. I think that's just so generous. Okay, so you get this final test, and it's like really dark line. You're like, okay, this is happening. I am having a baby. Walk me back first when the agency assigned you. I mean, I'm trying to look for a nanny, and I just went through hiring an assistant, and it was one of the most painful things I've been through. Could they really take care of my business the way I do? Could they do a good enough job? Like, all these questions going through, and I could interview so many people to do a job that I think is very important, including the one of just taking care of my baby. I'm like, but can you take care of my baby? Let me just, take a deep look at who you are. I can't imagine just being told, here's the person who's going to have your baby. How is that process like for you, and that trusting? Because I mean, it cannot be an easy process.
That's such a really good question, Olga. And I have to say, it wasn't an easy journey. Just that process of being matched was really hard. We were very lucky that we were matched very quickly, because I know some couples wait for, years to find a match. And for us, it was a matter of months. So I do want to, mention that I'm very grateful, and I realize how lucky we are. But so how it works is very much like a dating agency. Mm-hmm. So you prepare a profile and you answer 10,000 questions about who you are, why you're doing this, what kind of relationship do you want with your surrogate, medical questions, related to pregnancy termination, related to how many embryos you're willing to transfer, all of these things. So it's very invasive, and a lot of questions and a lot of soul searching as well. And then you put your pictures and how it works, because there's more intended parents than surrogates that are available. The agencies will present your profile to surrogates to see, and they decide whether or not they are interested in your profile before you get to see their profile. So that's how agencies work. Or anyways, our agency work. There might be other agencies that are a bit different. But all that to say, our first match, we get the match, and we were so grateful that the surrogate had chosen us as intended parents. But something for us didn't jive. And again, you were talking about control and trust. I think for those things, you really need to listen to your instincts. There was nothing wrong with her profile. One of the things, though, was that she was currently pregnant. And so we knew that she had to deliver a baby before she could proceed with ours. And for us, the timelines didn't quite work in our minds. And there was a lot of uncertainty. What if her delivery doesn't go well and she's not willing to do it at that point, or there's reasons as to why she wouldn't be able to carry another baby at that point? So there was a lot of uncertainty around that aspect of her profile that we didn't feel fully comfortable with.
Right.
That was the first profile. The second profile, so we said no. And, when you say no, it's such a big decision because you don't know when you're going to get another match. It might be, months. It could be a year. You don't know. But luckily, about a few weeks after, I want to say, another surrogate actually looked at her profile and was interested. And we fell in love with her. She had 7 children of her own, and she had never been a surrogate before. And she was considering doing it for a family member, but that family member ended up being pregnant. So she decided, that's something that I want to do for another couple to help. And so we were so full of hope. And so as part of the process, you have to start, drafting the legal agreement, but the surrogate also has to go through medical screening. And as we were talking about that, she backed out. So after a few weeks of dating and us being full of hope and so excited about it, for various reasons, she changed her mind. I think part of her got a little bit overwhelmed with the whole idea. And so we were devastated. And again, you're like, okay, well, how long is it going to take before we find another surrogate? And luckily, our surrogate, I'm going to call her B because I don't want to say her full name, but came through just a few weeks after. So we actually got matched with B in July, and we felt at first a little bit guarded because of what we had already gone through with the other surrogates. But with B, one thing that put us at ease very easily was the fact that she is actually a 6th-time surrogate. So she carried 4 healthy babies for other families before. She went through a journey that didn't result in a success, unfortunately, and we're her 6th surrogacy journey. And she has 4 kids of her own. This woman is a superhuman. She's amazing. Wow. She's just the best.
An angel in earth.
Yeah.
Whoa, so that is an extra layer of ups and downs, right? Like people, you're dealing with humans. And so they could be changing their mind. They could be having a gut feeling that says, nope, not this time. And there you are standing. This is my last question because I am aware of time. And I know that you're so graciously giving me time while you're at work. How are you coping emotionally? What are the things that help you stay at bay? Because I've been through ups and downs with a lot less layers than what you're describing right now, and still with many things that are out of my control. And thankfully, I have the tools that I have personally. Plus, I did seek out help. What has helped you?
It's a good support system. Some families and friends also, Fred and I as a team, we really worked as a team on this. I think that was a huge factor for my mental health. But you know what? Also, people like you, Olga, and that's why I think the importance of the community and the social media is so important, and talking about those stories. And it can be hard sometimes. I felt guilty about sharing my success because I remember how I felt when other people had successes. But at the same time, I'm hoping that it might give hope to one person or to 2 people. But just I think the more we talk about those things, the more we can support each other. And I think that's so, so important. But also, I think for us, and I think I mentioned it at the beginning, one thing that kept us going through all of this was one way or another, we will have a baby. And that mental state for us actually saved us because at so many points in time, we wanted to just give up, and we did not. And I'm so happy that we did not give up.
And this happiness is only going to increase by 1,000 the day you hold your baby. And as you see your baby growing and developing, every step of the way, you're like, thank God I didn't give up. Thank God I kept going, because it's such a big reassurance. I mean, you think you know love until you have your kid. around you, and then like love has a completely different meaning. And I personally wish that in year 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 of my struggling trying to conceive, somebody would have like shown me a photo of me holding my son, and what a difference that would have made to not have suffered the journey. But I mean, easier said than done. I do. I do want to corroborate with what you're saying. The importance of sharing our story. It's healing at so many layers you cannot even comprehend. And when I personally, I mean, as a life coach, social worker, mindset coach, I've been sharing things for a long time, but I didn't open up to share my story until 2 years ago, as I had gone through a failed IVF, and the pain in my heart was incredible. And I'm like, I'm going to use my community. And I reached out and I posted it on Facebook. And then I was immediately regretting it. I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? It's like now I'm showing this side of me. And the response was unbelievable. The amount of support and love that came flying through my DMs, texts, calls, everybody just sending us prayers and love and hugs and telling us their story that they hadn't told anyone. That then motivated me to open this to not just my friends, but to the Instagram world, to complete strangers, such as Val, that help us in our journey, and we helped her. You never know how your story is going to impact somebody, but by sharing it, you're normalizing your experience, you're stepping away from self-blame, and you're letting the community support you. Like, you guys just heard me cry to hear and to remember what it was like to receive a pregnancy test from Val. This is also the first time Val and I meet, like face to face, if you want to call it. And we can have such a strong feelings for each other because we're sisters in this journey. And this is what you're missing out if you're not reaching out to the community, if you do not have somebody supporting you through the mindset that is required. Because I think that even as an human on Instagram, most of my DMs are simply just offering my view on things like mindset support, which I think is so helpful. And then some people are lucky and this makes them really close to their husbands, but sometimes that's not the case, or to your partner. And if that's not the case, you're not alone either. That also happens. Reach out for help. There is many people such as myself who are here to help you navigate through that. There's people like Val who are opening up to their stories so that they can tell you what's worked for them. Might not work for you, but it's worth the shot. So, Val, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for coming and sharing your story. Where can people find you if they had questions about surrogacy, if they're in Canada, and even if they're not, but they've got questions to do with this? What works? How can they reach out to you?
Yes, I think my Instagram is probably the best way to reach me. It's at Shirley's Angel. So I don't know if we can include it in the podcast, but at Shirley's Angel. And I'm happy to answer any question people might have about surrogacy and just, share my journey with anyone out there who it might help. So, yeah.
So perfect. So yes, that will be in our show notes. Make sure that you go in there. You can see her account. You can go in and ask her any questions. As always, I want to thank you guys for stopping by and listening. If you found this helpful, give us a like and subscribe and share this podcast if you know of a woman who might find this really helpful. Also, let me know, review it. What did you think? And as always, come back and give me your feedback. Let me know what else you want me to talk about. I'm always happy to find guest speakers to talk about the subjects that you guys want to listen to. Val, thank you. Thank you. And I can't wait, honestly, for part 2. And I really hope baby's now then here and you can show me baby and we can all brag about how cute the baby is. And our listeners can get to hear the second stage of this journey for you.
Thanks so much for having me. And I can't wait either. I'm hoping there will be baby cries on the line next time we chat. So take care.
There will be for sure. Thank you.